Okay, so I'm going to talk about the one dev metric that, if it's the only thing you can afford to measure in your development process, this should be it. And I'm talking about the cycle time metric. I'm going to talk about why that metric is a great place to start when you want to get some more visibility into how your team develops and delivers software. I'm going to break it down into its components and talk about ways to be proactive about measuring and improving your dev process through that metric. So a word about me. I work at LinearB, which is a software delivery intelligence startup. You can read more about us in our link. And I have some my LinkedIn and Twitter profiles if you want to stay in touch with me. Let's talk about measuring the dev process, or understanding or getting more visibility into what happens, that magic thing that happens when developers write code and work on delivering it. So one important thing that you want to keep in mind is that, yes, visibility is great. Being able to measure something is the key to improving anything. But measuring developers, which are all free spirits, creative people, you need to be careful about how to do that without being a big brother or giving the impression that you are comparing people to each other, or stack ranking, or measuring the wrong things. All of these lead into cultural friction and into feeling that I'm being by the number of code lines I provide and not by the actual value I deliver. So a key thing about measuring the dev process is to move from measuring developers to measuring the process itself, and looking at the team, looking at how the team functions as an organ that delivers software. No one can deliver products alone. It's always a team function. And focusing on what are the key killers of productivity when the team is working on software. And we know from various research and from our experience that these are the key friction points are going to be context switching, when people move between very different tasks and need to load a completely different context. This always carries a tax, both a mental attention, but also pure time being spent just to get into the new context to do a task and then getting back to my original task. There's a related point around work in progress, or having too many things at play. People and many developers like to start things, like to begin a task. And sometimes it gives a feeling of progress where I've started working on something, I'm progressing there, but then finishing things and getting them over the finish line, getting those old tasks all the way to production, to customer value, is sometimes neglected. And that leads to a lot of WIP, a lot of context switching, and a culture where a lot of things have begun, but we haven't actually delivered enough of the things that we already started to do. And then finally, the other type of friction point and process productivity killer is around dead value. We've completed to work on some item. I have a great branch, a nice PR. Someone has reviewed my code. We've even merged it. But if the value did not make it all the way to customers' hands, be it in my production servers or shipped to its consumers, this value is like sitting there and not really providing anyone with anything. So the focus on pushing things all the way through so that the value actually gets consumed is a key part of a healthy process, where that is the focus. So if I'm looking at cycle time and trying to understand why this is such a popular and like overarching metric to look at the dev process, I'm going to define this, and like again based on research. There's the Accelerate, Andorra metrics, and other um, experts that have focused on how long does it take the team to deliver a single piece of work. I'm not looking at how many pieces of work were delivered. What is the output of the team? It's only focusing on kind of like an RPM measure of the team as an engine. For every single piece of work, which is typically a branch with new code, how long does it take from beginning to finish? And if consistently the team is able to drive down that time and have shorter cycles, which deliver less work, but all the way through, and then repeat that in very rapid cycles, that gives a lot of benefits across the process, removes those productivity killers, and I'm going to describe how. So we look at cycle time and split that into 4 key segments. The first segment is coding, when someone begins to work on a branch, begins to write some new code for a task, and all the way until their code is ready for reviews. Modern dev teams use code review methods to make sure that no one person drives the entire process. So once my code is ready for being reviewed, the coding phase is finished, and then the next phase, the pickup phase, begins. Pickup is the phase where basically I am waiting for someone to take a look at my code and give me their review. This is all about time spent waiting or letting someone know that they need to look at my code. Nothing really progresses in the pickup phase. And when someone has begun to review my code and is starting to actually look at it, we are moving into the review segment. In this phase, this is the entire discussion and additional code changes and agreements, everything that is required to have everyone agree that this piece of code can be merged, this branch is ready, and the review phase ends when the code is merged. And finally, after my code is merged, is made it to basically the code base, its value that is sitting there but not really benefiting anyone. The final phase is deploy, and that measures the time from when the code was ready and merged to when it's actually in the field serving customers and providing value. Obviously, this last segment depends a lot on my CD processes, on other dependencies that maybe I'm required to fulfill before I'm able to fully deploy that code. But understanding how much time my value sits idle and not really reaching customers, how much time between my code base updates and actual value in the field is a crucial thing to measure. So looking at these 4 segments, we can talk about different dynamics and what different things or problems in the process that cause each of those segments to blow up and take more time. Remember that our goal is to reduce cycle time, and by solving the different dynamics, we can improve each one of the segments and then get a much shorter cycle time overall. So in the coding phase, typically, I would say 2 factors dominate how long it takes for someone to code a branch until it's ready for a review. First of all, the actual size of the work that I've undertaken, the size of my branch, the scope of what I'm trying to do. If I'm able to chop down that work to smaller slices that can be independently pushed as branches, PRs, reviews, merges, and then deploys, then I have solved that problem and I have a better cycle. And it's a healthier thing overall to have smaller pieces of work that can easily be reviewed, less risk in merging and deploying them, and then just move on to the next slice. So slicing down work is crucial here. The other factor could be around the interface between requirements and coders, where if I start to work on something and then I need to clear some requirements that are not clear up front, maybe some edge cases or other behaviors, that requires a cycle of talking with product managers or owners and other types of input, and that will necessarily make my coding phase much longer. So getting better requirements up front, getting a much clearer, concise task is key to get the coding time down. And I think it's clear that it's improvement in the process if we're able to get there. For the pickup phase, this is mostly around coordination and attention within the team. My PR is ready for review. Someone has to know about it. Someone has to make time to review it and remember to do so. So by improving team communication around this, by providing the right visibility at the right time, people can jump in and review my code faster and allow for a more rapid cycle where everything is still in context. Someone has reviewed my code, made some comments. Maybe that's not too far away from when I finished writing that initial version, so it's still fresh in my mind. Having a shorter cycle here and shorter time where nothing progresses is obviously a key win. And since code reviews typically require a context switch, someone has to stop what they're doing, and then being deliberate about context switching is a great way to drive down pickup and also fight the tax or reduce the cost of context switching. And when I'm saying deliberate, I'm basically saying if you've already context switched for another reason, for example, you had lunch, or you're started your day, or you're out from a long meeting, now is a great time to get look at the code reviews that are waiting for you and get some of these going. So when you're conscious about context switching, you can bundle in some additional ones before you go. You're get into the zone for your main task. For the next segment, for the review phase, this is a conversation time where people review each other's work. They need to communicate about that. So I know that there are some changes requested from me or some comments I need to address. Then I make some changes, additional commits. I need to tell the team or the reviewer that I've made those changes. So a lot of communication, a lot of back and forth. Obviously much harder now with remote or hybrid remote work than it used to be when everyone was in the same room. And the way to really improve this dynamic beyond just overall communication improvements are things like, are there enough reviewers? Do I have a bottleneck with who can actually review code? Sometimes the original design of how to build this piece of code or this change needs to be better because maybe the review process is showing me that I need to rewrite everything. So better upfront design, better upfront tech thinking may help here. And also a mindset of it's much more important to finish things than it is to start things. I talked about the whip culture. So if everyone on the team is of that mindset that yes, a review, anything in review is now a great candidate to finish and get over the finish line, and prioritize that over working on branches that are still in the coding phase and early in their process. So preferring done over started is a great way to drive down review time and have everyone focus on, oh, these things are almost there. Let's finish them first. And then finally deploy. I mentioned the CI and CD, having better tests, having smaller work items. These are all key ways to reduce the deploy time, reduce risk around deploy, and typically that allows you to up the frequency in which you are deploying code as a team. So what happens when you master cycle time and when you drive down to the best of your abilities each of the segments and the overall cycle time in your team? What are the kind of benefits that elite teams get from driving this metric down? And this is why this metric is so important, because it really captures the entire process. And so you get with much smaller tasks, which is you have to do that to get cycle time right. You have to have small tasks with shorter cycles. This really bumps up predictability. It's much easier to predict when things are going to be done when it's a long series of short items and not a short list of large items that takes days and weeks each to finish. Every delay would be compounded in that case. You have to get your teamwork, communication, coordination, attention solved to get cycle time down to where it should be. So almost a byproduct, but a necessary byproduct is great communication in the team. great awareness of what everyone else is doing. Otherwise, your pickup and review times are going to be long if everyone is focused just on their own work. If you're able to quickly drive value all the way to customers' hands, you have a much shorter learning cycle. Coding has become an iterative process where you give some piece of new value, get feedback from your customers or users, and then can iterate instead of building huge changes that take weeks to deploy, and then you've not learned anything until you've actually deployed it, and your cycle is much longer. So this is a business learning cycle here that gets much better. You've reduced work in progress. If you're doing a lot of short things instead of some longer things that overlap, then your team and personal WIP are going to go down, and your context switches are going to go down just because you have less things going at the same time. And then having those smaller changes with well-defined boundaries. I'm just doing one thing in this PR, solving one bug, or doing one piece of refactor, or providing one story of one feature, not trying to bundle things together, really drives down the risk and delivery. Like, what happens when I merge the code? What happens when I deliver it? Instead of delivering large chunks of a lot of changes all bundled together, with typically very hard to untangle if something goes wrong, or understand the impact and risk of a problem in a specific deploy. Finally, I'm going to talk about show some numbers from what we've seen in the field around what can you do by just paying attention to cycle time, and by just using that as your leading metric to understand your dev process, to manage for all 4 segments and find the causes and improve on each of those causes to make my cycle time and my team cycle time shorter. So you see here are numbers of like how much teams typically improve, in this case using our product, but basically just looking at cycle time, paying attention, driving some retrospect cycles of improving based on the data. You see the teams are able to slice down cycle time, by all the way to 40, 50, 60, and even 75%. This means like a 4x improvement in cycle time across most of our customers. And this just by looking at something and taking some deliberate actions to reduce that. And this pays off tremendous value in terms of happier teams, less stress, much more gets delivered, much less context switching, which we know is a huge cause of angst and developer burnout. All of these happen when you focus on cycle time. So I've talked about the single metric that if you want to begin looking at your dev process to begin to measure and improve it, that's where you should start. But I want to say an additional thing. Metrics are great. You have to make that first step. You have to get metrics and get visibility into the dev process if you want to improve. But that's not going to be enough to get you all the way to elite performance and to get all the benefits that you can from improved cycle time and so on. Like we see, mostly like almost everything else in life, it's a 80-20 or 90-10 problem, which means most of my branches, most of my code changers are going to have good cycle time, reasonable cycle time, and then I'm going to have a few outliers where my cycle time is dragged and much longer. This is not like any kind of normal distribution, but a tail distribution. So understanding where and like which of my branches, which of my pieces of work are causing the most issues, are getting a much longer cycle time, and basically dragging the entire team is crucial to understand and really improve, because you're not going to improve all of your cases and all of your branches in the same way. You want to focus on the problematic ones, and by improving those even just a little, your overall average and your overall performance really jumps. So it's about understanding the metric, but also finding the specific problematic or outlier areas and focusing on those. And then taking an additional step from measuring what happened, which is the metrics are typically retrospect kind of view. Let's look at the last sprint or the last month or week, understand what was my cycle time, look at the segments and try to find ways to improve. But if you take that a step further and say, I can now detect when a specific branch or a specific pull request is delayed in real time, now you're able to give your team tools that let them avoid or mitigate the problems as they begin to happen. And I'm showing you a couple of examples. These are real-time alerts that are sent to the team when a specific pull request is delayed or there is some detection of a risk in that code change. Anything that the team can consume and act upon immediately is going to really help avoid the cycle time blowing up, or the retrospect a case of, oh, my cycle time was large this month, what can we do about it? So moving from metrics to insights, where I know where to focus, which branches, which PRs, where are my problems, and then taking that into action and giving basically a way to orchestrate the dev process in a smart way. Give the team a hands-on tool to react to the problems before they become problems, or react to small problems before they become large, is the key additional step to get you from good to great with cycle time, and similarly for other dev metrics if you want to go more advanced. So just to recap here, metrics is a great first step. Taking this all the way from a metrics dashboard that an executive looks at to something that the developers in the team can consume in real time, in where they already live, like Slack or their IDE, and in a way that is actionable for a specific PR or a specific issue, not just overall. That is the key next step to get you to elite performance. So to wrap up, I'd like to answer any questions that people have. I'm inviting everyone to join our Dev Interrupted community, or to just get started measuring your cycle time with NRB with our free plan. And happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Yishai. I think your topic is really interesting. I think what I liked personally very much is all the different tips to make cycle time go faster. I don't necessarily know that cycle time is the one metric that I find the most important thing, because delivering fast is good, but it doesn't necessarily say anything about the quality or the happiness of the team, or all of these other metrics. But I do definitely very much like all of the suggestions on how to make cycle time smaller, because I do think it's one of the things to strive for in a healthy development environment. So very nice summary of things you can do on that end. I don't know if there are any questions, but we have about 20 seconds left before the next part of the schedule. So if there are any questions, please ask them directly to Yishai, or ask them in the chat. And then I'd like to thank you very much for your contribution. I hope you have fun during the rest of today. I don't know if I'm getting lucky here in track 3, but I'm seeing all really good sessions. So thank you for being one of them. And
Thank you.
we have a few more to go.
Great.